Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to all of you.
Welcome.
I am Sister Rosemary Nassif, a school sister of Notre Dame, Executive Director of the Loyola Marymount University Center for Catholic Education. And my partner here is...
Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Lemma. I'm currently serving as the Senior Researcher for the Center for Catholic Education. And in my previous life, I worked with Sister Rosemary, actually I worked for her, as her Program Officer at a major foundation.
We want to first and foremost thank you for being here. Thank you for being present in mind and spirit, wherever your body is located. This has been more than a challenging 16 months in the world of Catholic education and the world in which we all live. It has been Herculean, demanding, and stretching. We have and still are experiencing 3 pandemics: COVID-19, a heightened awareness of our sin of racism, extreme inequity across healthcare, education, and finances, technology, and internet. We all are very much aware of each of those. Yes, you have more than survived, and you have taught a lot about the value of a Catholic education. 3 stellar highlights that our Catholic schools have demonstrated throughout these past 16 months: quick responsiveness, revolving from in-person classroom learning to online learning, most schools in less than 72 hours, and then from online learning back to classroom-based learning, often, and hybrid learning, often before other sectors. Second, attentiveness to your families. Yes, maintaining the sense of community, keeping the entire school community together, community building even with physical distancing, staying connected. And thirdly, we congratulate and commend you because you are choosing to be more than you were BP, before the pandemics. BP. So we are committed to assist you in that choice through our nuggets of insight this morning, this afternoon, or this evening on solving the mystery of fundraising success in the midst of 2 pandemics. The origin of the word pandemic is Greek, pan meaning all, and demos meaning people. We in the United States in our church are experiencing all 3 of these pandemics simultaneously: COVID-19, heightened awareness of racism, inequity across education and finances, access to healthcare and technology and the internet. All 3 have changed and are changing each of us. All 3 have turned our world of education upside down and inside out. All 3 are changing the world of philanthropy and fundraising. That's our conversation this morning. It is providential that we are gathering around this time. July 8th marks the birthday of John D. Rockefeller in 1839, industrialist, founder of Standard Oil, one of the world's richest men at his time. He summed up the prevalent model of the free enterprise system when he said, "God gave me my money," which I hope was the belief that motivated him to then give it away to others. I believe the total assets today of the Rockefeller Foundation, 83 years after Rockefeller passed away, are around $5 billion. In the world of fundraising, there are 3 commandments. And if you remember anything from our conversation this morning, remember these 3 commandments.
3 commandments, 1, 2, and 3.
Leadership, relationships, and impact. Whenever you approach a funder or write a proposal, remember these 3 commandments and lead your introduction to your proposal, to your conversation with the funder, to whatever you're doing to build your strategy. Lead with those 3 commandments. When I was at a Conrad Hilton Foundation, I had a rule. Always give to leadership. No matter the strategy, a good leader will deliver a great impact. The leader does not always have to be the chief or the boss or even the principal or the superintendent. It could be a teacher who is the project manager, who is a terrific leader and has passion and commitment. Those are the two qualities that really push funders over the line and will deliver confidence in the mind of the donor that the project will have the desired impact and even beyond the intended impact. I've had the privilege of being president of two Catholic universities, one on the East Coast and one here in California. It was probably me who got the donor in the door, but most of the time, not me who got the donor to commit. Often it was the faculty, sometimes the students who were passionate and committed to deliver the linchpins to the funding, to deliver those linchpins, that impact to the grant itself, or the student who was blessed by the impact. Even when you overlay the world of pandemics, these three remain the commandments: leadership, relationship, and impact. However, how you engage them or work with them has some differences, and we're going to discuss with you those differences. So Kara, sometimes people call themselves a philanthropist who are donating money to good causes, and sometimes they say philanthropist. So what distinguishes those two names, or what distinguishes that nomenclature?
Well, there are several things to kind of think about when you're trying to differentiate between philanthropist and philanthropist. So what we're really talking about is the audience. Who is the person that you're approaching to ask for funding? Is it an individual who has money, who is interested in helping you get to your goal with his or her own money? Or is it somebody who is a representative of a foundation who is spending the foundation's money to get you a grant? Well, we make this distinction between philanthropists and philanthropists. A philanthropist is an individual typically. It's somebody who earned the money themselves. They tend to have strong emotional connections to a particular cause. They're relationship focused. So think of the expression, people give to people, fundraising before fundraising. This is your audience when it comes to individuals. Oftentimes, philanthropists are willing to kind of make big bets. So they'll decide that they want to put all of their money into a specific cause. And they have a lot of discretion in terms of how they're going to spend that money and how they want that money used. Oftentimes, philanthropists tend to be more involved because they have those strong connections and those strong bonds. Philanthropists typically don't require as much bureaucratic red tape. Oftentimes, you don't even have to write a concept note. Maybe you just have to kind of give a pitch and the individual will, quote unquote, write a check. Now, philanthropists are a completely different beast. And I think oftentimes people confuse philanthropists with philanthropists. So for example, when I served as a program officer for a foundation, people often tried to treat me as though I was the donor, and that's not true. My responsibility was to steward family resources. I managed a budget. I did paperwork. I did site visits. I asked for metrics. I worked with individuals on concept notes and application processes. And then I defended those proposals once they were completed in front of the board. So the philanthropist has really less discretion in terms of getting the money out. And what I mean by that is philanthropists are bound by all sorts of rules and requirements. They tend to be in two camps when it comes to the type of philanthropy that they do. The first camp is what we would call responsive grant making. So, for example, you would come to a program officer or a philanthropist at a foundation and say, I just need 100 laptops. Can you get me those 100? Can you get me the funding for those 100 laptops? And the philanthropist or the program officer would do what they can to get you those 100 laptops. On the other hand, there are other types of foundations. Think of the Gates Foundation, think of the Rockefeller Foundation. Some of the bigger ones are going to be focused more on what's called strategic philanthropy. So what they're trying to do is solve a problem at its core. And the way they believe in doing that is by funneling large amounts of resources into one specific problem, right? So if you compare my example of getting 100 laptops to kids in schools as a response mechanism, the strategic philanthropic organization, the philanthropist, is going to want to solve the problem as to why these kids don't have laptops in schools. The strategic philanthropist is going to do a massive grant-making program, multi-tiered, multifaceted, multi-stakeholders, to, again, not just get laptops into the hands of kids, but solve the technology problem of why kids don't have laptops. So oftentimes, people at the school level, when they're asking for money, will call up a program officer and not kind of have an understanding of whether the foundation is strategic or whether the foundation is responsive. I often give this example. It's sort of like calling a program officer at a foundation is sort of like calling up Coca-Cola and asking for a 6-pack of Coke, right? It's very difficult for somebody working at a very high level with large amounts of money to sometimes cut smaller checks. So consider the audience. If you just need a 6-pack of Coke, the philanthropist is probably the way to go. So let's talk about strengthening relationships.
Yes, our second commandment, relationships. That is critical to your fundraising expertise and your fundraising success. It's the relationship, whether it is with a philanthropist or a philanthropist. These past 16 months, we've built, maintained, and strengthened relationships mostly through Zoom. And the pattern is, in that dynamic, you probably haven't connected with newer funders because there's no way to sit down with them. There's no way to connect with them on a person-to-person basis. It's always been virtually. However, now we're moving forward with face-to-face relationship building. Practice number one. This is practice, and you could call it rule number one. Do not take for granted the relationships you've maintained through Zoom. These have been probably with your faithful funders, the ones that you've had prior to the pandemics. Set a time to meet together in person as if you are rebuilding anew, because you are. You're rebuilding anew. Listen to where funders are. They've suffered through these pandemic realities. And sometimes as much as you have, or as your school has, especially emotionally, they've suffered. They've wondered if their giving is as attentive as it needs to be. They've seen the essence of the critical issues that they in some way want to impact positively. So they will still be your highest prospects for this year, especially for 2021 and into 2022. You will begin to build some newer prospects as you move forward on a face-to-face basis, but they'll be your key to doing that. They will introduce you to the newer prospects, and they need to know that these newer prospects are their colleagues. And you never want to let your colleagues believe that you're not smart. They want their colleagues to know how smart they are because they have contributed to your school, to you as a leader. So what you want to do, this is practice number 2 in this fundraising dynamic right now, in our reality now. Make sure that your faithful donors know how your school has responded and is responding to returning to the classrooms. The challenges, what they've lost, the assets, what they've learned through the pandemic, and they're not returning back. We're not going back to where we were before. We've learned. So you are moving forward. And make sure your donors, your faithful donors, know that. You're not just taking the easy way of returning to the classroom. You know that there are some issues that you need to be more attentive to. Perhaps the social emotional realities of your students, the social emotional realities of your teachers. How you're going forward needs to be in some way targeted to what you've learned through all that you've experienced in these past 16 months. You want to tell them that you're smart and that you're innovative and that you're bold. Funders like those three qualities: smart, innovative, and bold. Your school's response in this return to classrooms, again, you're moving back from online to perhaps hybrid or directly classroom-based instruction. You've assured that your students have the iPads, the technology that they need. You're using all that you've learned about technological education. Now you're putting it into stable platforms as you return to the classroom. You've distributed lunches to families that you will continue to do in ways that will help them manage the financial issues that they've experienced and still are experiencing throughout the pandemics. You've received government funding. You've been very attentive to get the government funding that was dutifully allowed to private schools throughout this entire time, so that you've really gained other resources that can help augment the donors' resources. Donors always like that you're getting funding from other places, because in many ways that allows their funding to make a greater impact. How many of your students are achieving at the right levels and achieving across ethnicities? You know, that's what your donors want to know. Are those students from the lower income families, from the minority families, are they achieving at the same rate as other students are? That whole issue of equity right now has become a heightened interest among donors. You're continuing to pray together. You've done that throughout these past 16 months virtually. Now you're going to do more in person. And how are you managing that transition? And your lessons on Catholic social teaching, how they've become highlighted at this time, the sacredness of every person, the dignity of the person. That's the foundation for all of Catholic social teachings across race, culture, ethnicity, social background, learning differences. We are a community, each of us, together, bonded together by a community in the body of Christ. People share and help each other. Practice number 3, highlight a checklist of achievements on your website. Make your website loud and bold. Tout. This is the time to tout. You want donors to be proud of their giving, as I said previously, and proud of you for being a great leader and marketer. You want them to be proud of you. So when we look at the shift in donor giving during this time of the COVID-19 dynamic and the racism and equity pandemics, when we look at this, we see that in general, donors will either maintain their giving or increase their giving. They're not pulling away. And the stock market has been pretty good for foundations. Their access to funds has increased in general. Their corpus of the foundation has enlarged. And so they want to be generous. They know that this is the time to give away and to give with high impact, as well as to give large amounts. But their giving in some ways has shifted. They've gone to what is essential right now. Healthcare, education, human services, these have been essential throughout the last 16 months. And in many ways, they continue to be essential as we move forward. And, you know, we talk about being on the road to recovery. especially from COVID-19. But the road for recovery is not linear, and we all know that. It's precarious. We can't take for granted that what we're experiencing today is going to get better tomorrow. We can't take that for granted right now. So there are a lot of unknowns, and donors want to help you fill the gaps of what are the unknowns to how you can be bold in charting the future. And they want you to be aware of both in your conversations with them. Don't just talk about, the good things going forward. Talk about how you're going to, what kind of obstacles are you planning to experience? And how are you going to address those obstacles? What kind of pushback do you think there may be? And how you're going to plan for that pushback. There has been a 4.1% increase in total giving in 2021 in this first quarter. January, February, March have increased our donor giving. And it's predicted that there will be even a greater increase in 2022, a 5.7% increase in donor giving in 2022. So don't be afraid to ask. Do not ever be afraid to ask. And ask from your solid partners, and ask your solid partners in fundraising to open up other avenues for resources for you, other people for whom they can be the key to building that relationship. So donors may be redirecting their previous funding to some of the real basic essential needs today. Education will always be a priority, but they'll also be including funding toward any kind of strategy that will help you in some way move the equity needle forward positively, so that all students, all families have opportunity and have access to the resources that they need to develop to the fullness of their potentials. The last thing that I want to say about this pandemic impact, in the past, donors have somewhat hesitated to give unrestrictedly. Unrestricted funds allow the grantee to really do with the funding in the best way possible, that he or she is understanding the needs of their particular institution. But, and donors have wanted to have some control over that. But now they're not as shy as giving unrestrictedly. So in your grant proposal, don't be afraid to ask for funding for general operations. You may need to change some staffing, add some staffing. You may want to have a counselor in your school or a counseling center in your school, given what students are experiencing in coming back to classrooms. This is not going to be perfect. It's going to be a key dynamic that will help us move forward, but it won't be perfect. We'll continue to learn along the way. Yes, we will continue to learn along the way. All right, Kara, why don't you talk a little bit more about how to begin a proposal and how to go forward with setting up your approach to funders, to develop your case or your pitch.
Sounds good. Well, let's roll up our sleeves a little bit and kind of get into the nitty gritty about how to deliver a really great pitch and to develop a great case. First of all, I think you really need to know what you're doing. What are you passionate about? What is your organization trying to achieve? I think when you're approaching a program officer or a philanthropist, you want to avoid just throwing the spaghetti up at the wall to see what sticks. That typically doesn't work too well. I think your credibility as a leader is really important. What I want to do is give you an example of an organization that I worked with when I was a program officer. So a few years ago, I was approached by this executive director of a leadership organization that works with all students, wealthy students, low-income students, middle-income students in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And her goal is to make this leadership program accessible to everyone. But she had one challenge, and that was getting scholarship money for kids that were in the children of low income families. That was her challenge. And in order to be able to reach out to those children, she needed to get an assistant director. And we're talking, the grant was for about $20,000, I think. What was the first thing that I did? The first thing that I did was find out who this person was. What was her credibility? What could she bring to the table? How could she really move her own organization and help the foundation that I was working for move forward on its strategic objectives? So what did I find out? She had won the Cardinals Award, which is the highest honor for the Archdiocese. She had a blog where she was featuring organizations that do great for the world. She was working on a television show. So this woman really had a lot to offer. She was a visionary leader. Now, this is not to say that all of you are going to be writing television shows and, writing books about philanthropy or about giving. But the important thing is that you have that credibility, and that if there's an issue, that program officer or that philanthropist is able to call you and say, I need something to help further your case, and you're going to be able to deliver on it. So for this organization, the current problem, like I said, was that they were trying to reach out to children from low-income families, and they needed somebody to be able to do that. They wanted some funds to help fund a position. And part of what was really important about this was that it was really critical. It was that in order for this leadership organization to touch more kids, she needed to do it right now. The timing is really ripe for kids in leadership, and specifically Catholic leadership. That's what I think distinguished this program from others, to attract students from all over Southern California to come to this program. And I think, innovation, part of what's really exciting too about working with the foundation is that it gives you the opportunity to innovate. So what are the different platforms that you're going to use to be able to kind of reach your strategic goal, reach your fundraising goal? How are you going to avoid what often people call as donor fatigue? I think a lot of times donors, especially at the philanthropist level, get a little tired of feeling like they're just writing checks all the time, and that things aren't changing. So what are you going to do to really turn this whole project or this whole organization on its head to avoid that donor fatigue? And then the last thing I think is really important that doesn't get talked about enough, and that is, how will you show impact or give people a sense of the results? So to go back to that organization that I was talking about that focused on leadership, I'm currently working with them right now to develop some surveys, some pre-surveys and post-surveys for the kids that participate in the program to show measurement, to show how have their attitudes about leadership changed as a result of having completed this experience. And we're doing a whole kind of 360-degree evaluation of the program. So I would encourage you to work with either a university, a consultant, or somebody that can help you give a donor, a funders, a holistic picture, or even some baseline data about what your program is definitely accomplishing. I think pictures are really important. You want to visually illustrate what you're doing for funders and for philanthropists and for philanthropers. So just keep that in mind. Monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Sometimes it's called measurement, evaluation, and learning. One tip is, if you're working with a large foundation, if you say you're asking for a $100,000 grant, you'd want to allocate about 12% of your budget now to measurement, evaluation, and learning. So give yourself that freedom to take advantage of a foundation's offer to fund a project like that. It's a little bit of work, but the rewards will pay off, to infinity and beyond. All right, let's go over just the actual, I forgot to mention too, at the center of all this are the students. So make sure that when you're developing your pitch, that you're really bringing in the voices of kids. One thing that I noticed, and I think Sister Rosemary can attest to this too, is that whether you're a philanthropist or a philanthropist, adults love to hear students speak. We love to see what they're doing. It's so exciting. It gives us the sense that the future is promising and the future is bright. So keep that in mind. So let's move on to talking about the proposal. I want to talk to you about another organization. It's not specific to Catholic schools, but it was a project that stood out in my mind because it was just amazing from start to finish. And the organization, it was called Medicines for Humanity. So the organization focused on providing healthcare to children and families in Haiti. They had expanded to Africa, I think, at some point. And their emphasis was that sisters were delivering a lot of the healthcare needs to these children and families. Well, and this one project that came across our desk, I was sort of struck by the title. So they had spent a lot of time developing an amazing title, and the title was called Breath of Life, right? How powerful is that? Breath of Life. And I'll tell you why it's so powerful in a second. They needed to develop like an issue and a need, like what is their particular issue in Haiti that they're trying to address? Well, Breath of Life comes in to play. They were trying to get breathing machines to babies and into hospitals. So in Haiti, there was a high incidence of premature births. And for babies to be able to survive, they needed this particular breathing machine. And so, that's an issue. That's like a real issue and a need. But in addition to the breathing machines, there was a hook. The hook was, how do we overall increase the life expectancy of, not life expectancy, but how do we get it so that mothers and babies will live, right? So how is it that we're able to save the lives of babies and mothers? So they were looking at how sisters were delivering healthcare. And in addition to getting the machines in, they were looking at the overall healthcare, the maternal child health healthcare system. Well, why is it timely? It's timely because babies and mothers were not surviving. And so we need to make sure that we're providing the breath of life to these families. What was really interesting too about this particular project was nobody else was doing this kind of work. So Catholic sisters had rolled up their sleeves, were getting into the trenches, and had identified that this was an issue and that nobody else was really tackling it. I think too, the alignment with the foundation that was great about this project is that when we were working at the Hilton Foundation, Sister Rosemary and I helped the Hilton family fund projects that were specific to Catholic schools and specific to Catholic sisters. And so this organization, Medicines for Humanity, had done a great job looking at our Hilton Foundation strategy and their organizational goals and figuring out how the two of them fit together. I mean, I can't tell you how often I would field cold calls from people that were just asking for money but hadn't done any homework. So it really is important to do as much as you can to identify your audience. Again, it all comes back to audience. What is it that the philanthropist needs? What is it that the philanthropist needs? What is the alignment there? And then I think the last piece of this is there's philanthropy. The word philanthropy means love of humanity, right? So whether you're approaching an individual philanthropist or a program officer, there is that emotional need, I think, that comes out. And so I think it's important to identify in yourself, in your project, and in the foundation what emotional need that this is filling. So I think I've given you some things to think about. I probably didn't emphasize enough too that, you need to have a really good hook. You need to have like a thesis statement where that's sort of your guiding star. I mean, think about this concept of breath of life and how powerful that is as a conceptual idea. So, have the concept and let the foundation or the philanthropist bring life to that and make that a reality. All right, let's move on to the next slide, where we're going to talk about, Sister Rosemary is going to talk about impact.
Okay, are you ready for impact? And as Kara indicated, relationship building and hooking the funder can have both a brain piece, a mental direction piece, and a strategy piece, but as well as the emotional hook. But when you're doing the impact, you really want to get down to the practical results. Originally, we had the 3 commandments: leadership, relationship, and impact. All right, impact is bringing the results into some concrete reality, a concrete success. And the leadership over strategy, first bullet point here, indicates that strong leadership usually will deliver more than what the strategy had intended. So the leadership is critical in terms of what the funder is looking for in, will the strategy actually work? Will it deliver the impact? Now, impact over outputs is often where we struggle. We think, for instance, or we can think, I should say, that I've delivered 200 iPads to the students and the families in my school. What a tremendous impact. That's not really an impact. That's an output. The impact is what has happened as a result of those 200 iPads. Have students learned more? Have they been more attentive to their lessons? Have they in some way engaged together with other students through that iPad? In other words, have they connected online with other students, with other learning partners, with study groups? So the impact is not what you give, but what you create. What you create through that gift, or what you create through that tool or reality. And so just remember that what funders are looking for is the impact. What has it changed? And change does not mean that now these families have iPads. Change means that these families have grown. These families are demonstrating a way to engage beyond what they had before, to develop more than what they could have without whatever it is that they've now received. So remember, impact over output. And sometimes surprise impact can be really key to the success of the strategy. And by that, I mean, for instance, I'm going to give you an example of a surprise impact that I've experienced in grant making. When I was at the Conrad Hilton Foundation, we created a program called Catholic Sisters Week. And it was usually around the first week in March. It would begin on March 7th. And around International Women's Day, because we wanted to highlight the reality that sisters are international. And we thought the direction was that this would alert people more to the lives of sisters, because sisters are not as identifiable as today. The surprise impact was that sisters really appreciated connecting with other sisters. You know, that's something we don't do well across our congregations. We don't network across our congregations well. And that was a surprise impact that occurred. So, and another surprise impact, when I was at the Hilton Foundation, we gave to a Catholic sister who was in a location, actually in Missouri, where they had a lot of students who were from other cultures, especially Spanish-speaking families, who were having a difficult time learning in English in their schools. So what she did was she got a group of retired sisters to come into the schools to tutor the students in English. And it got to be such a popular and a successful reality. All these students were learning English in a much more dynamic way, in a much more essential way that was improving their academic achievement. That was the impact, the improvement of their academic achievement. The surprise impact was that these sisters were impacting the whole spiritual foundation of those schools. And they had really turned around the teachers and the principals to be fully engaged and to feel so connected to the foundation of their school and a Catholic mission. They had elevated that whole sense of Catholic mission at the schools. And the other surprise impact is that she had more requests for this than she could fill. So the surprise is also a real key alertness to the overall impact of the strategy on a go-forward basis. So I want to share with you a letter that I just received. Let's go back to that slide, please, Kara. Always make students the highlight of your impact. How has this changed the lives of the students? Not just what you have done or the outputs that you have delivered, but how has it changed the lives of the students? Like the example I just gave, these students were learning at a much more dynamic way and a much more powerful way in terms of fulfilling their potentials. So I would like to share with you a letter that I received from high school from which I graduated, just to give you a sense of how to connect with potential donors. And this was a letter that went out to all the alumni at the high school. I want to just read to you 2 lines in the letter. And this came I would say after a year in the pandemic. Here's line number 1. Notre Dame takes great pride in being able to meet the needs of our students throughout all of life's challenges. When they need us, we stand beside them. That's the hook. When they need us, we stand beside them. The other line that impressed me. We will not recall the disruptions to everyday life. What we will think of, who was at our side? Who was at our side? Your support will be forever remembered by a student in need. Your support will be forever remembered by a student in need. That's the emotional hook to get the donor totally connected to who you are. First, to who you are as an institution and as a leader, that these are important to you, that you stand by your students, and that who students will remember will be them who stood by their side. So to get that emotional hook with your donor is very important, and then to determine and to show them the impact of their gift. So Kara's going to talk a little bit about innovation at this time.
All right, so we all know that the 3 pandemics that Sister Rosemary has been talking about have really caused us to, learn some new things. I mean, what's the old expression? There's something about stress and innovation.
Yes, don't waste a crisis.
There you go. So don't waste the crisis.
Don't waste a crisis.
Don't waste the crisis. Resist going back to your old habits. Old habits die hard, but I think given that at least the COVID-19 reality has given us the opportunity to really innovate with how we reach out to people and what we do to help people feel connected during an immense time of social isolation. So in doing so, I think it's really time to start taking a look at your Instagram account, your Facebook accounts, all of your social media. If you don't have those things, now's the time to do it. Put some pictures up there, have somebody maintain and monitor an account. It's not that difficult to have a parent run a Facebook group, right? Like I'm in charge of my son's school's Facebook alumni group. Very easy to do. I would say too that, hybrid events have popped up where you have a mixture of in-person and hybrid, you have online presence. So for example, if you're gonna have an auction or have some sort of, presentation, invite people to be in person, but then also continue on with the online component. I mean, you can double the capacity of attendance simply by doing that. And I would say a lot of if you don't have necessarily the technology at the school, talk to the church. A lot of the churches, a lot of the parish priests now have recording capacities to be able to do that sort of thing. It's time also to think about not just having closed events. So closed events, I'll give you an example of a typical closed event. You know, you have a fundraiser, you have an auction night, and people give wonderful speeches, and you bid on gifts and things, or bid on things, and then everything closes, and then you go home the next day and the event is over. Keep those events open. Like, for example, at my son's school, they had an auction that was online. And so you didn't necessarily have to attend the event to be able to bid on something. It was open for several days. They recorded everything that was happening at the event and left the recording open for others to see. Sister Rosemary just hosted a really wonderful workshop yesterday that was all online, but she did a wonderful job of keeping it, recording it, and then we're going to send out that link to everybody who wasn't able to attend, to all the participants, so that, you know, we have kind of an ongoing connection or link with the people that we're soliciting funds from. One thing that I think is a cool thing to do, especially with when you're working with millennial parents, think about rebranding or doing I think it's Throwback Thursday is what everybody talks about. So rebranding, I mean, I'll take my son's school, for example. I attended that elementary school, and the logo has been exactly the same for 35, 40 years. So the principal of the school decided, you know what, in the middle of the pandemic, let's innovate. Let's do a new logo. Let's refresh it. Let's get new items, hats and shirts and things, so that when people are walking around the community, that they see that the school has something new and exciting to offer. By throwback, this is kind of, I suppose this is sort of an oxymoron of sorts, or sort of ironic, but at the same time, what we want to do is kind of bring back elements of nostalgia from the past. So we want to update the school so that it looks modern, but then also show kind of a connection to the school's past. So I'll give you another example. At my son's school, where I attended, the original school colors were green and gold, and somewhere along the way, it was changed to maroon and gray. The mascot was a dolphin, and then it was changed to a jaguar. Well, the school is going to be celebrating 40 years next year. And so in anticipation and in honor of that, we're going to create sweatshirts in green and gold with the dolphin on it, so that the kids can wear that as part of their uniform in commemoration of the 40th year. So it's just something exciting to bring back the alumni, to connect the kids, and really being present and showing that you can be innovative and creative, really. I mean, in a lot of ways, innovation really just means creativity. So also, I said a few slides back that you really do need to develop a measurement, evaluation, and learning plan. We're not talking about doing, multivariate statistical analyses. We're talking about getting some descriptive statistics. The percentage of students do an assessment of the geography, where the students are coming from, look at some of their achievement measurements, and put that together in a plan that you're going to study, that you can then assemble when you get the results from it and distribute that to funders. So with that, I think we're going to turn it over.
Yes, and before we turn it over, I just want to add one thing to Kara's explanation of innovation here and all the ideas that she threw out. Every year there is a Giving Tuesday. Make sure you find out when that is this year. Plan ahead. Secure a matching gift. Donors love to know that their gift is getting other gifts. So get your best donor, secure a matching gift. That person may want to be unknown. But that's quite all right. Just let everybody know that their gift, whatever they give, will be matched. And as Kara indicated, use online to announce it, to get other gifts. Facebook last year raised, I should say in 2020, Facebook raised about $8 billion for organizations that were doing good works throughout the 3 pandemics. So don't forget the online opportunities to get other donors, especially your alumni, and also, donors within the community who know your school. And email everybody in the community, even your parent families, letting them know that $1 is a gift. $5 is a big gift. And highlight your students both on Facebook, as Kara indicated, as well as on your website. Don't forget, as Kara indicated, to use social media, and make sure you thank everybody at the end. The thank yous are very, very important. And as we see here, this is who it is all about, our students. And yes, they will be in college. They will be going to college because they had an excellent Catholic education. So in whatever way you can, make sure the students are the stars of why you're going forward, why the money or the resources are going to be important to you, and where your focused attention is on their growth, their development, their reality, and how their families can support all that they're learning and all that who they are. You're developing stars in our nation and our world. Stars that are committed to the Catholic social teachings, that know every person is sacred, that want to learn about other diversities, other cultures, other ways of thinking. I used to tell the students at one of the universities where I was president that you don't know the truth about anything until you know how people think who are different than you. If you always run around with your same like-minded friends, you will never learn the breadth of our world. So with that, remember that your faith is your highlight. It is the star. Donors love to hear about how your Catholic reality is a part of the dynamic of the institution. And St. Catherine Drexel is a key inspiration to all of us. She believed in the education across racist nationalities, across all of those, the minority communities. She was one of the founders of Xavier University, the first African-American university in the United States. She also founded the Blessed Sacrament Sisters, the congregation that specialized and welcomed African-American women as their sisters together in creating a world of equity. So I'm going to just suggest that we say the prayer, the novena in honor of St. Catherine Drexel, as our closing together. So please, you can mute your microphones or you can leave them on. And let's pray this together as we go forward in each of our Catholic schools, uplifting all students across ethnicities, across social incomes, and across learning differences, lifting up all students. So let us pray together. Ever-loving God, you called St. Catherine Drexel to teach the message of the gospel and to bring the Holy Eucharist to all people. By her prayers and example, enable us to help those in need. Bring us all into the common communion of your church, that we may be one in you. Grant this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. And go forth to all of you. God bless you, and we will be with you in prayer, spirit, and great expectation.
Thank you so much for attending our presentation. Don't forget, there are 3 commandments. What are they? Leadership, relationships, and impact. The 3 commandments. God bless you all. We are signing off.